imagining the frontier as an interaction zone between white Europeans and nature. But this is a totally inhabited area. The Turner thesis, one of the main problems is, hadn't got any Indians. Right? Buffaloes are obviously central to... Remember, I don't think they're going to ask you this question on a U.S. history test. The Spanish bring the horses, right? These people basically are dirt poor farmers, or they're farming with like a stick and eating acorns and nuts, and they're dirt poor. When they become nomads with horses, they become rich and much better fed. They become hunters and warriors. But until horses, these people are pathetically poor. And today, if you go to the Indian cultures of the Great Plains, they celebrate their horse culture. Well, their horse culture was brought without white people, without Spanish. They don't have any horses, right?
Did they have dogs?
Yes, they do have dogs. Dog was...
I mean, like, didn't they use dogs before horses? Like,
Dog's the first domesticated animal. The Aztecs had grew dogs and ate them. That was their chubby little dogs. The prairie is the West. Remember, don't make the West the Rockies and West. Make the West... Think of St. Louis as your gateway to the West. Everything west of St. Louis, the West. That's where basically you take off. The Homestead Act opens up the West to settlement. Basically, you go there and you break up the sod, you live there for a few years, and it's yours. Dry farming is basically, because it's an arid zone, you have to grow crops that require very little water. And so there are new types of strains of grain and so forth, and corn, that require less water, and that's what you're going to have to grow. And the other thing about the prairie is that Deere has invented a plow, which is basically going to allow you to plow up the heavy plains, the prairie grass. And McCormick has a reaper. So when you do set a farm, these farms are going to be larger and much more mechanized. And one of the reasons they're more mechanized is there's a civil war going on, and people are fighting in the war. You have a labor shortage. There's an incentive to mechanize in your farm. You cannot. Some of your sons are going off to war. If you're going to farm, you're going to need machines. By the time you get to California, these reapers will be gas-driven. And so you'll see, by the time California becomes agricultural, the other thing we see going on is the Pacific Railroad Act, 1862. Don't forget that the Transcontinental Railroad and the Homestead Act occurred during the Civil War. This is happening during the Civil War. What's happening during the Civil War in the West is that the soldiers that used to fight the Indians have been called to the Civil War. And so Indians that have been put on reservations and have been sort of tame and under control are now breaking loose. I don't like the reservation so much. I'm going to go out and, eat some of that white guy's cows. This kind of stuff. And there's reaction against this. And then there are massacres taking place on each side. But we're starting to have Indians breaking out, Indian wars that are emerging during the Civil War. And it's because the army, which has kept them in place, has gone to fight the Civil War. These guys are Pacific Railroad Act. This is a major part of the development of the West of the railroad. This is, if you go up on Nob Hill or whatever, you'll see all the hotels that are named after them and everything. These guys are Leland Stanford. He has a little university down here. Named after us. Mark Hopkins. There's a nice little, what's that at the top of the mark? It's the, what's it called?
Hopkins Hotel? Starlight?
Yeah, I guess it is the Starlight Room. Yeah, the Starlight Room at the top of the mark. You can go there for a drink, on prom night. Sarsaparilla. The Transcontinental Railroad is not, you start one at St. Louis or the East, and you start another one at Sacramento or whatever, and you work to the center. They meet in Utah, Promontory Summit, and this is where the two railroads meet, and they pound in the Golden Spike to put the railroads together. And this is the actual event. It was commemorated in many huge epic portraits, and this is the portrait. You can see the portrait is a little more grandiose than the actual event, but nevertheless it was a significant achievement. It is, in the 19th century, no one has as many miles of railroad track as the United States. No country in the world can touch the United States in terms of railroad. The United States, same thing happens with the automobile later on. No one can touch the United States when it comes to transportation, partly because of its expanse. And the other thing they say about the railroad here is that it obliterates time and space. Things that, winters and terrain that used to stop you and cold, the railroad just motors through. Now, the other thing to keep in mind here is that cowboys, we have this romantic image of cowboys. Cowboys do not exist without railroads. Cowboys drive, and the big cattle drive. The cattle drive ends at the railroad. You just take your fork and you just go right through them. They're unbelievably tender. But they fatten them up against it. So they drive them to the railroads. The railroads come here, they put them in a corral. They feed them lots of food to make them heavier because they're going to sell them by the pound. And they put them on the train and send them to Chicago. And in Chicago, if anybody's read The Jungle, they get to the slaughterhouse, the packing house. And that's kind of an ugly sight. This is also a period when the whole point here is that cowboys and this Western system depends on new technology. The new technology of railroads and also refrigeration. Refrigeration here is mostly ice, not, refrigerators. But they do refrigerate railroad cars so they can slaughter animals, and they can put them in railroad cars, they can send them to New York City, and there's also refrigerated ships. That's how Argentina exports a huge amount of beef and competes with the United States in the 19th century because of refrigeration or these ships that they're basically sending around. So they're creating a world market in beef in the 19th century, and that's what the cowboys are doing. The cowboys are the first link in a chain of a brand new worldwide market for the distribution of beef. The other thing that's going on in the West is these are the mines. You notice the railroads? Railroads have this uncanny ability to sort of hit mining areas, if you've not. Railroads go to mines. Forget about cities. There aren't any cities. Railroads service silver and gold mines. There's some lead, there's lead in Leadville, obviously. But in Virginia City is silver, and California is gold. And so when we look at the West, when we look at the development of the West, the railroad is a absolutely critical element in the economic development of the West. The economic development of the West doesn't happen without the railroad. And there's 3 stages of mining, just so you know. I don't think they're going to ask you this question. There's placer mining. I'm going to get out in the river, and I'm going to have my little screen, and I'm going to go for nuggets. And then there's hydraulic mining. I'm going to get my fire hose and blast away the hillside, and then catch whatever comes down. And then there's industrial mining, which is basically what we see in the final stage. So these are increasingly intensive in terms of how expensive they are to get yourself involved in them. Anybody can get a little screen and run up in the river. Costs a little bit more. You get larger companies that are highly capitalized for hydraulic mining. And then you have corporations involved here. So the mining business becomes big business in the West.